My HOA president fined me $14,000 over a mailbox, so I read the bylaws and took his entire board. Here's how. Some people get a little bit of power and handle it just fine, and some people get a little bit of power and it rewires their entire personality. They start to believe that a clipboard and a title make them a king. My old HOA president, I'll call him Gerald, was the second kind. For 2 years, Gerald used a volunteer position that was supposed to be about pothole repairs and pool schedules to wage a petty, personal little war against anyone who didn't grovel. And for a while, he got away with it, because everyone in the neighborhood was too tired or too scared to fight back. Then he came after me over a mailbox. And by the time it was over, Gerald had lost his seat, his control of the board, about $14,000 of leverage he thought he had over me, and the quiet authority he'd spent years building. This one's about what happens when a small tyrant picks a target who actually reads. Settle in. So let me set the scene. My wife and I bought our first house in a nice, quiet subdivision. Good schools, friendly neighbors, the whole thing. It came with a homeowners association, an HOA, which, if you've never had one, is basically a little neighborhood government. You pay dues, and in exchange they maintain shared spaces and enforce some rules about how things look. In theory, that's fine. In practice, it depends entirely on who's running it. And running ours was Gerald. Gerald was retired, bored, and absolutely intoxicated by his own authority. He drove the neighborhood in a golf cart with a clipboard, looking for violations. A trash can left out an hour too long, a lawn a half-inch too tall, a car parked on the street on the wrong night. And he didn't just note these things. He fined people, aggressively. Now here's the thing about Gerald's fines. Most people just paid them. $40 here, $75 there. It wasn't worth the fight, and Gerald counted on that. He'd built a whole little kingdom on the fact that fighting a $40 fine costs more time and stress than just paying it. For our first year, we kept our heads down and stayed off his radar. We're not confrontational people. We mowed our lawn, brought our cans in, and figured live and let live. Then we replaced our mailbox. Our old mailbox post had rotted, so we put in a new one. Nice, simple, black, totally normal, the same style as half the street. We didn't think twice about it. 3 days later, we got a violation notice taped to our door. The mailbox, Gerald claimed, was not in compliance with community aesthetic standards. There was a fine. We were given 2 weeks to replace it with an approved model, or the fines would escalate. I want to be clear about something. I drove around the neighborhood and counted 11 other mailboxes that were the exact same style as ours. 11. None of them had been fined. This wasn't about the mailbox. This was Gerald flexing. So I did what I thought a reasonable person does. I emailed Gerald politely, pointed out that our mailbox matched many others in the neighborhood, and asked which specific standard it violated, and where I could read that standard. His reply was short. The board has discretion. The fine stands. I'd suggest you comply. The board has discretion. That phrase stuck with me, because it's the kind of thing people say when they're hoping you won't check whether it's true. And that's the moment something shifted in me. Because Gerald, like every small tyrant, was running on a single assumption, that I wouldn't do the work, that I'd grumble, pay the fine, and replace a perfectly good mailbox. He had no idea I was about to become the most informed homeowner in that entire subdivision. That night, I requested a full copy of the HOA's governing documents, the bylaws, the rules and regulations, and the architectural standards. In most places, the HOA is legally required to provide these to any owner who asks. They have to. It's the homeowners association. The homeowners own it. It took them a couple of weeks and a second, firmer request, but eventually I got everything. And I read all of it, every page, highlighter in hand, and what I found was a gold mine. First, there was no mailbox standard. None. The community aesthetic standards Gerald cited didn't mention mailboxes at all. The fine had no basis in the actual rules. Second, and this is where it got interesting, the bylaws laid out a very specific process the board was required to follow before issuing any fine. Written notice of the specific rule violated. a chance for the homeowner to be heard at a hearing before the fine was imposed, documentation in the official meeting minutes. Gerald had done none of that, not for me. And, as I'd soon confirm, not for anyone. Every single fine Gerald had handed out for years, taped to doors, no hearing, no minutes, no due process, was, according to the association's own rules, completely invalid. Now, here's where most people would stop. I had what I needed to get my own fine dropped. I could have waived the bylaws at Gerald and walked away clean. But I kept thinking about the 11 other mailboxes, and the elderly couple 2 streets over who'd told me, nervously, that Gerald had fined them 3 times last year, and the single mom who paid a $100 fine for a trash can because she couldn't afford to fight it. Gerald hadn't just come after me. He'd been quietly bullying an entire neighborhood. So I decided I wasn't going to just defend myself. I was going to take the whole thing apart. Step 1 was the request that broke it open. The bylaws gave any homeowner the right to inspect the association's financial records and meeting minutes, so I requested them, all of them, several years' worth. And going through those records, with the rules right next to me, I found 3 things that turned a mailbox dispute into the end of Gerald's reign. 1. The fines. As I suspected, almost none of them were documented properly in the minutes. They'd just been collected. Thousands of dollars over years in fines that didn't follow the association's own legally required process. 2. The spending. There were payments going out to a landscaping consultant and a maintenance contractor with no contracts, no bids, and no detail. Just checks. And when I cross-referenced a couple of names, let's just say they weren't strangers to Gerald. 3. The elections. The bylaws required annual board elections with proper notice to all owners. There hadn't been a real contested election in years. Gerald had simply kept declaring himself and his 2 friends re-elected to rooms that were mostly empty because nobody knew the meetings were happening. I didn't get angry. I got organized. Because the beautiful thing about a bully who breaks the rules is that the rules, once you understand them, are a weapon you can hand right back. Here's what I did. I knew the bylaws also said that if enough homeowners, a specific percentage, petitioned for a special meeting, the board had to hold one. And at that meeting, the homeowners could vote. So I went door to door, quietly, politely, with a folder. I didn't rant about Gerald. I just showed people the rules, showed them their own invalid fines, and asked one question. Would you like a say in how your dues are spent? Turns out a lot of people had a lot of feelings about Gerald that they'd been swallowing for years. The elderly couple, the single mom, the 11 mailbox neighbors. Within 2 weeks, I had far more signatures than I needed. We filed the petition for a special meeting and a new election. By the actual rules, with proper written notice to every single owner, the kind of notice Gerald had been skipping for years. And for the first time in a very long time, that clubhouse was full. I'd prepared a simple, calm presentation. No yelling, just the bylaws on one side and the records on the other. Here's the process the board is required to follow for fines. Here's the proof they didn't follow it. Here's the spending with no contracts. Here's how many years it's been since a real election. Gerald tried to do his "the board has discretion" routine, but it lands very differently in a full room of your neighbors holding copies of the rules you've been ignoring. People who'd been quietly fined for years suddenly understood that none of it had been legitimate. We held the election right there. Gerald and his 2 friends were voted off the board, all 3 of them. A new board was elected, including, yes, me, because once you've read the entire rule book, people tend to want you in the room. The new board's first order of business was a full review with an actual attorney. Every improperly issued fine in recent years was voided and, where it could be, refunded. The single mom got her $100 back. The elderly couple got their 3 fines reversed. My mailbox fine, all $14,000 of escalating penalties Gerald had threatened to pile on if I didn't comply vanished because it had never been valid in the first place. The mystery consultant payments got handed to a forensic accountant. I won't pretend I know exactly how that ended, but I will say Gerald became very difficult to reach for a while, and the new board tightened the financial controls so that nothing like it could happen again. And Gerald? Gerald lost the one thing he actually cared about. Not money, control. The golf cart still sits in his driveway, but he doesn't patrol anymore. There's nothing to patrol. He's just a guy in a subdivision now, same as everyone else, which, it turns out, is the thing that bothers his type the most. My mailbox, by the way, is still there, the exact same one. Never replaced it, never had to. Every time I walk out to get the mail, I think about how a man with a clipboard looked at a quiet, reasonable homeowner and assumed that meant easy. Here's the lesson, and it's the same one every time on this channel. People who abuse a little authority are betting that you won't read the fine print, that you'll be too tired, too busy, too conflict averse to check whether they actually have the power they're claiming. Usually, they're right. That's the whole scam. But every so often, they hand a fine to the one person who's going to go home, request the documents, and read every single page. So if your HOA or anyone ever tells you we have discretion, do me a favor. Ask them to show you exactly where it says that. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe. There's a new story like this every week. And tell me in the comments, what's the pettiest thing your HOA has ever come after you for? I guarantee someone will top it. I'll see you in the next one.